Hello, hello, hello. My name is Felix. Just want to give you a chance to let me know if my audio is okay. I'm from Ledger, and I'll be here answering any questions you might have about, your Ledger device, how to use it. There's been big news in the industry lately, so you might have some questions about how to withdraw stuff off exchanges, things like that. You can see here that there's a special on as well. If you guys want to get in on that, you can use color 30 to get some different colors of different devices if you'd like as well. But I think first thing that I'll always mention is that don't give out your 24 words. Don't sign in transactions you don't trust. And then pop those questions in the chat, and I'll try to get to answering them as best we can. So first up, we had Bikram C. You've mentioned, hi, the screen on my Ledger Nano S is no longer working. You understand it can be a problem. Any advice on replacement, rectification steps? We wouldn't be able to, generally speaking, repair the devices at all. You can potentially get a new device. That way you might benefit from more memory, as well as you can see different colors if you care about that at all. Not entirely necessary if you don't want to, but yeah, we don't actually repair devices, unfortunately. All right, next up we have Gaius Fleas. You mentioned, hi, you're getting an alert on Ledger Live saying to update the Ledger Nano X firmware to 2.2.1. Is this the one with Ledger Recover? You don't want to open any attack vector by opening my wallet to key extraction. So I think the main thing I wanted to mention there is that it does not open your wallet up to key extraction. So it doesn't open up a new attack vector at all, anything like that. You've also mentioned that you've written to us a couple times, but no reply. So if you want to pop the case number in chat, I'll be more than happy to try and pick that up for you directly as well. If you had any more in-depth questions or anything like that. But just so you know, no new attack vector. So it wouldn't be something that you would have to worry about if you're updating your firmware. If you want to use Ledger Recover, then that's something that you can potentially start the process for with your consent, of course. So continuing on, next question is from Diana Virus. You mentioned that you have the Ledger Blue and it's not supported anymore. What should you do? The whole point of hardware wallet is to get and forget. You paid over $200 for it. So I think the first thing to mention there is that one might argue that there might be more than just setting and forgetting, or getting and forgetting in your particular case for hardware wallets, right? You might want to send, receive, things like that. So as long as you have the recovery phrase, you should be able to manage the assets, and updates to the device are definitely very important. So with your particular case, Diana, I think the main thing that I'd have you do normally is to get a hold of us. You can come out to here, look something like this, support.ledger.com. Really get a hold of us. We'll grab some more details from you, Diana, and then we'll see what we can do for you in particular with that. Because, totally understand with Ledger Blue. All right. Next up, we have Marujo. I did a preview of your question in Translate because unfortunately I only speak English, but if you can get a hold of us as well, if you can understand that, you should be able to we should be able to have a chat with you to get that fixed, mate. Continuing on, Stix56, you mentioned that your Ledger Live is prompting you to upgrade to Ledger. The version is 2.60.0. Does this introduce the Ledger recovery option? So one thing to mention there is that that version number should be in reference to Ledger Live, which isn't related to Ledger Recover at all. It's just an update to Ledger Live in particular. So a quick answer to that question would be no, nothing related to Ledger Recover. Website didn't indicate other than some minor bug fixes, which is exactly what it is. So you know. Continuing on, Andreas, you mentioned, hi, if you've set up a passphrase, so you've mentioned 25th word, and I want to recover my account on a new device, how am I able to input the passphrase in the recover process? So, what I always refer to is, can be this one. Both of these are pretty good. I'll go with the first one this time, actually. Essentially, you'd want to set up your device with the same recovery phrase, first of all, and then you'd want to either attach to pin or set temporary passphrase. The difference between both is that if you set as attach to pin, it would mean that you would, continuing on, be able to use the same pin to be able to log in. So if you're using pin 4 zeros for your normal accounts, and you would use pin 1 2 3 4 for your passphrase, for example, and you continue to use 1 2 3 4 when you want to sign transactions for the accounts that are derived from the recovery phrase and the passphrase. So that's how you would use attach to pin code. Set as temporary, sounds exactly like it is. It'll just be temporary for that time. So that's how you would go and potentially sign the transactions. I think in terms of what you might be doing, if you've just reset your device, you're setting everything back up again, you might assume that your Ledger Live needs to be set up again as well. And so if that's the case, I'll get up my Ledger Live. You can just go and add accounts as you normally would, and you'll be fine. Good to go from there. You might need to be in your passphrase or not, depending on which accounts you want to add, and that's it. Bit long-winded, sorry about that, but yeah, that's how you would generally go through the process of managing your passphrase accounts. Stuart Butler, when is support coming for Arweave on Ledger Nano X? I thought it would have made more sense to release support for all devices at once. Yeah, I totally would understand. I'll definitely pass on the feedback for Arweave in particular. But yeah, no time frame for you, Stuart, with regards to Arweave support on the Nano X. Wish I had better news, but yeah, we'll work on that as best we can. 8014, you mentioned when staking Solana or any alt, after staking the coin, how would you check that in Ledger Live when login later? When staking Solana or any alt, after staking the coin, how to check that in Ledger Live when you log in later? I might imagine if you're wanting to stake in Ledger Live, yeah, you should just be able to, check in Ledger Live. I think one way that I always do, I think because you mentioned Solana as well, you can always potentially use some kind of block explorer. So Solana, you might use Solana Beach, for example, or the canonical Solana block explorer to check on your transactions and rewards and things like that as well. That might be one more way that you might check, verify that things are happening on chain as you might expect, and it might depend on the token or asset you're talking about as well. All right. To keep going, guys, if you guys have any questions, please pop them in the chat. I've only been here for, another 10 minutes, but yeah, I'll be here for probably another 45 minutes or so. Yeah, if you want to pop your questions, we'll try to get to answering them as much as we can. Rob T, you mentioned, how often do you update coins that are on the ledger? So depending on what you're talking about, you might never do that, or it might be something that you have to update the applications for, but I'll get into that in a second. You've also mentioned, like after migrations, and do you have to manually add them? So migrations can happen occasionally. I wonder if we have a help center article about that, and yeah, here we have. So if a token that you own is going through some kind of migration, it might mean that the asset might need to be on a different address, right? So depending on the migration that's happening, it might come from you needing to interact with some website to sign a transaction, which you have to be really careful. There are a lot of scams out there, so you got to make sure that you're interacting with the right one. Make sure you're checking with multiple resources and things like that. That's what I'd normally do. Otherwise, if there's some kind of migration, sometimes it's just an airdrop with a specific time frame. Maybe I got a little off track there, but how often do you update coins? It would depend on the specific scenario. Some protocols might have to update might want to update often, and they might have found a better solution than moving the token really often or anything like that. So yeah, there are I don't think it should happen every day or anything like that at all, for sure. But do you have to manually re-add them? If you're talking about Interledger Live, it is something we do have to do for the tokens. So if something comes up, we're normally trying to keep track, or if something hasn't been added yet, you can always let us know, and we'll get to adding that into Ledger Live if we need to as well with any contract migrations. All right, let's keep going. On HBAR Ninja, you mentioned that you can see Arbitrum in Ledger Live on your computer, but you can't swap or send it out. I think with that one, HBAR Ninja, I'd be wondering what specific message you might be getting. So is it something like the parent account might not have enough fees? Is there something very specific that'll be happening for you that's not allowing you to swap? Would be my first thing. It might be that you need to use a DeFi protocol or the protocol outside of Ledger Live, let's say with something like MetaMask, potentially. I'm not saying it's necessarily you might have to do so, but it could be something to test just to make sure. We can always try to work with you on that one as well if you get a hold of us at support.ledger.com. All right. Thank you, Diana, as well, for the question. Aria, you mentioned that firmware 2.2.1 that you weren't able to buy anything from the market, and the devices are asking for an update. Is there something specific that you needed to had in terms of a question there? I totally understand. There are some users that might be wanting to pause on update, but that shouldn't be necessary. There isn't any. I think I also answered a question before from Gaius Fleas specifically mentioning about a potential attack vector, which is not true. We wouldn't be able to. There's no new attack vector allowing key extraction or anything like that. But Aria, if you have any questions, I'm definitely here. If you have any concerns as well, it's definitely here to pass on feedback and have a chat with you if there's anything that you're having trouble doing. Updating the firmware should allow you to continue to swap assets or anything like that if you need as well. Sonji Henderson, you've mentioned is the debit card coming to the USA? It's definitely something we want to be rolling out for you guys in particular, but yeah, wouldn't have any specific time frame for you at all. I wish I had a better news for you for that one. Normally, if we had a date or anything like that, I'd definitely be letting you guys know as quickly as possible. So yeah, nothing that I have for you. Mr. Money Pulse, just to make sure the phrase is only stored on the individual device, so nobody have access outside the device. Just to make sure the phrase when you should only be entering the recovery phrase onto a Ledger Nano device, if you're using one. Yes, that's correct. And I think the thing there is that you might only be storing your recovery phrase on something that's like a paper, non-digital, or something like that. So yes, in the end, that what would happen is that you could make sure that nobody would feasibly have access to your recovery phrase, which is essentially the entirety of the backup for access to your assets for deriving your private keys, right? So yes, that is exactly what we'd be hoping to do, making sure that the Ledger device and that piece of paper or whatever storage solution, because there are other storage solutions as well. If you go onto our site, you can actually see things like the CryptoZeus, right up to Bill Fodl is the other one, where you can store your recovery phrase in a secure way. It might be fireproof, waterproof, whatever it might be, or might want to be, depending on which way you want product you might want to use, or storage method you might want to use. Okay, let's keep going. All right, ARIA, it should be optional. The other option, and it's not something that we'd normally recommend, because you might have to enable things like blind sign-in. You might become more risky to deal with services outside of Ledger Live ARIA, but you could try using swaps outside of Ledger Live. It might be an option for the moment. That might be something you could try as well, depending on what swap you're hoping to make, though. So if you had any questions, you can pop what pair you might be using. I might be able to give you a hand. Rob T, are the Ledger devices in any way risk of a backdoor? Assess? If so, how can we protect against this? The risk of a backdoor. I want to be specific. I hope you can be specific, rather, Rob, about what kind of backdoor you might be, or what kind of security risk you might be hoping to protect against in particular, because it could be a different scenario for each for what you might be thinking of in particular. So if you can go into more detail, I might be able to answer it. It might be something we'd have to answer with you over email, get a really specific question, and I can give you a really specific answer. So if that's the case, you can always drop a case in the chat as well, support.ledger.com. You can pop that case number with me, and I could be the one to answer that for you as well, Rob. Stuart Butler, does the CO card have a monthly or annual fee associated with it? I actually don't know off the top of my head, so we can actually double check now. If I remember correctly, it doesn't have a any annual fee as far as I can remember, but we shall make sure. Yeah, what fees do you charge? And you can go to the platform fees. So this is depending on the location. So let's say for me in particular, I can check that all here too. But there's no, if I can remember correctly, there's no yearly fees or anything like that. There might be a fee in terms of getting the card initially, if I remember correctly. Okay. Let's keep going. Still a little while to go, guys. So if you guys have any questions, please put them into the chat. I'll try to answer them as best I can. I'll help you with anything you might need with regards to your Ledger device. So HBAR Ninja, nothing. The continue button not lighting up. Okay, thank you. I'll continue support. Okay. If the continue button doesn't light up in particular, so Arbitrum, swap send, yeah, I would want to double check, maybe see exactly what error message you're getting. Again, HBAR, if you get the the case number, and if you wanted to do it by email, even pop that into chat and I'll have a look at that personally. AP, you mentioned you have Theta, ERC20, so I can pop that into the help center just to make sure I have everything in front of me. On a ledger managed address, you've tried a couple times to transfer to TNT. You hate Theta Wallet and you want to sell all, but you can't. I would want to double check first of all what TNT would be. It's not something that I'm directly familiar with. Having a look now. If you didn't want to use Theta Wallet, it might limit options in terms of what you can do. It's using a third-party wallet, so MetaMask, Theta Wallet, LEVEX wallet, for example, Eternal for Cardano, all these different types of wallets. When you're using the Connect hardware, you're connecting your hardware wallet. You're not sharing your private keys with these entities. You're just signing the transaction on the device. So it's not additionally going to be less. It's not going to be less secure. Rather, let's put it that way. When you're using these third-party wallets, if that's a concern for you, if you don't like the UX, you might have to deal with it when you're managing assets on Theta network with Theta. If Theta Wallet is the only option, for example, but having a look, is this Tyrion? I wonder if that's what you're hoping to swap into. So if you AP, if you're hoping to swap into another token, it might just be a matter of using the correct DEX, making sure you have enough transaction fees to pay for whatever transactions you're going to make with any AMM or DEX, and go from there. Hope most of the steps should be here, and yeah, we can always try to give you a hand, AP, if you're having any trouble as well. You can see one of the ones you can maybe even try is Rango Exchange. We try to include a bunch of third-party methods that you can try if you need to, always. Okay, let's keep going. Thank you. Universal, you mentioned, when will my Vault Inu V3 shop in Ledger Live? I wouldn't have necessarily a time frame for Universal. I think also if you need to manage it, like in the meantime, you can always use something like MetaMask just to send it between places if you need to as well. But no specific time frame. Once you add them, they do look over them. It might not be a guarantee that they'll be added in, but once you guys let us know, we try to add those in as quickly as we can, as best we can. Reist Teoff, you mentioned how to stake XRP. There shouldn't be any such way in Ledger Live in particular. There might be other ways outside, but not something we generally recommend. There are a lot of scams. Please be careful. Of course, you're going to want to look for potential yield on your assets, so please be careful. And anyone that asks for your recovery phrase, asking to assign transactions, generally speaking, is going to be something you want to make sure to look over very, very thoroughly. All right, Angel, MTK, you mentioned, first of all, the Ledger program BizRaz does not verify the faulty networks. It does not write its name, then it goes to the wrong address. Better network, thanks. Oops, not 100% sure what that would be, although I have a feeling maybe you're talking about Binance, for example. If it doesn't, I think this is the thing that I wanted to talk about today. Obviously got a little sidetracked with the questions, but it brings me right to where it is now. So if you're withdrawing from, let's say, Binance, one thing that they potentially recommend is that you withdraw with Binance Smart Chain. Generally, the fees can be lower than if you're using Ethereum mainnet, but the asset might potentially be different, or be affected, and it'll definitely be on a different network if that's the case, right? So I think one thing is to make sure that you are using the correct network when you're withdrawing from Binance, when you're withdrawing from Coinbase, for example. It's 100% something you want to make sure that you know where it is. It happens all the time. I think when there are some exchanges, for example, that only withdraw on certain assets on a specific network too. So definitely something that can happen. I hope that's what you're talking about, Angel, but if it's something more particular, let's see what else you've mentioned. The owner of the program must have a mechanism to control the network, then we can at least see the correct network. It would be better if there was a more comprehensive token exchange variety between crypto tokens and coins is suitable, and accountable blockchain network would be better. I think you can definitely use bridges. They are pretty fragmented as well, Angel. You can use things like, I think I mentioned Rango Exchange, Cross.2, not multi-chain now, but these are the kinds of things that you can potentially think about using to bridge assets across networks as well. Or you can just send them back to the exchange as long as they're supported and then send them back out, which can be a hassle, totally understand, but something you can potentially do. All right, let's go back. Dan Shrimpton, staking ETH through Kiln, through Ledger. So it's within Ledger Live, you're using Kiln and you're staking ETH. Once you stake, you withdraw your Ethereum. How long does it take to withdraw back to your Ledger? At the moment, it won't be possible. They're still waiting to release that particular functionality. But once you want to withdraw, so the way that Kiln, for anyone that doesn't know, the way that Kiln would work is that Kiln are the ones that provide the infrastructure for the validating, and you would provide the ETH, for example, to be able to stake and earn a yield on that one in particular. You can see here 4.5% APR approximately, you might expect. In the specific case of when the functionality is available, you'll be able to enter the queue to withdraw, and it will depend on how many other people are in the queue. At the moment, I think the entry queue is longer than the exit queue, and there's no exit queue, but you can always double check that online as well. But once that functionality is in place, yes, you should just be able to withdraw straight away. Let's keep going. When is Stacks available for Australia? For the whole world, I wouldn't know yet. I'm totally waiting on Stacks to be released as well, Marius. And the same with the CL card. I know they're trying to release it as quickly as they can. Just want to make sure that they're following all the right regulations and everything like that. Make sure we're doing it correctly, or as best we can. Angel, continuing on, you mentioned that it needs to check and show cross networks or show as validation, or wrong deposit goes to a wrong address. The results are frustrating. Recover. Thank you very much. I understand it can be frustrating, checking across networks, but I think prevention is normally the best cure in these kinds of cases as well, because it would require some kind of standardization across all of these networks, right? So it would be interesting. Mike Mean, is there going to be a switch in Ledger Live that allows us to completely disable or enable Ledger Recover? So first thing would be it's completely disabled initially anyway, so that wouldn't be a switch necessary. If you wanted to use Ledger Recover, the switch would be to turn on, and then you can enable Ledger Recover. So I think that should be. Maybe if I'm misunderstanding your question there, Mike. But yeah, that's how I would think about the Ledger Recover in particular. But yeah, if you wanted more clarity on that, definitely pipe up love to hear from you as well. Oh my, you've mentioned, does updating firmware on the Ledger Nano S Plus or Ledger Nano X turn into a hybrid custody device? No, just updating the firmware doesn't do anything like that at all. Marius, is it possible to sell XRP, Cardano, HBAR, and other currencies straight from the ledger and hold it as USDT? So holding USDT with a ledger managed address is totally possible. Depends on the network you want to hold it on as well. So mainly I would think about something like Ethereum as an ERC20 token that you might use, right, to hold it as USDT. Now, then it's about converting from those assets to USDT, and you might need to find a service. And it also, because it does depend on your area, where you're located, I think it's important to first try out within Ledger Live. You can go here, you go to the swap section here, and then you can actually give it a try for what you can and can't swap between. If that's the case, and you've checked and it doesn't work, for example, you can go into the Discover section as well, and there's normally a couple of options there that you might be able to give it a try with as well. That's definitely something that I would suggest. But of course, I think the big question with you, Marius, would be how you're going to make those swaps, because it does depend on what network you're swapping on. I deal a lot with EVM chains in particular. Cardano does have some AMMs, so like Sunday Swap, if I remember correctly. There are others as well that you might want to use. So you can always use something like the swap feature too, with Changerly if you want to rather, as a percentage option. You can always check the quotes and things like that too. All right. Mike wants to rephrase the question. There we go. Are you going to give the users the option to completely remove Ledger Recover from the devices? Okay, that might be something we can get a hold of you more specifically for, right? Because it's a very specific question, and I'd want to give you the exact right answer for that one. So how about, Mike, if you pop into support.ledger.com, write the whole email out, and then pop the ticket number into chat, and then that way I'll actually pick it up directly, Mike, and then we can get a very specific answer for you. Since I totally understand it is important that you want to get the answer for that one in particular, and yeah, could definitely try and give that to you. All right, again, guys, I'll be here for probably another 20-ish minutes. If you guys had any questions about your devices, big things happening in crypto at the moment, SEC, with Binance and Coinbase. So definitely, I know some people might be worrying about withdrawing, and if that's the case, there are definitely articles that you can jump onto in our help center that would be able to guide you through the process. Definitely always good to make sure that you're going in and making sure but making sure you're withdrawing on the right network. For example, if you're withdrawing on Binance Smart Chain, or you already have done so, I've selected the MetaMask option, but you don't even need to use MetaMask. You can jump to Ledger Live and you can add BNB Smart Chain account to be able to manage assets that way. Same thing about making sure that you're checking which network you're withdrawing on, if you're withdrawing from Coinbase as well. Something to keep in mind, that tokens that you get may or may not be, the native token, may or may not be a pegged token or anything like that. All right, Grung K mentions, do you plan to have in-mobile app-based support? I don't like using Sprinkler due to exposing my email address. Yeah, totally understand that. I'll make sure to pass on that feedback as well, mate. definitely something I think would be great to have. Excuse me. And then the feedback definitely helps us really reiterate that point. So I'll definitely make sure to pass that on as well. Boom. So next question we had from Nina. Why can I not find my accounts in Ledger Live? So I think the first thing that I'd be thinking of is when you're in Ledger Live. So this is just an interface where you'd be interacting with whatever's installed, might be installed on your computer for Ledger Live, right? When you add an account, when you go through this process of adding an account, you might use the private keys or the public key, more generally speaking, to get the address for a particular network or asset. So Ethereum, for example, you might get the address. So my troubleshooting for you, Nina, would generally rely on what are you, what account are you looking for? What would the do you have, let's say, for example, a transaction ID, some kind of address? Then we could also double check on chain. So when I say on chain, I mean, let's say we're looking for an Ethereum account, we might need to go somewhere like Etherscan, right? To be able to check for any transactions that might have happened at particular addresses. I think that's really important if you're making sure that you're checking everything you're doing on chain is like hitting, it's getting posted on included in a block. Then you know that you're making a state change to the network, and you're doing that. So Nina, you mentioned assets are on XRP, so we'd want to make sure, for example, that we can check everything on XRP scan would be the one that I might use, right? And you might put your address here, double check, is like, hey, is my address, are my assets there? Is there a transaction where it might have moved? Something like that. So that's the first thing I kind of think of. And if it's not appearing in Ledger Live, for example, let's say I go through the process to add an account and it's showing a zero balance. Is it showing a zero balance because the funds have been sent out? Is it showing a zero balance because there's no transactions on there at all? And then it'd be about thinking about what recovery phrase it's set up with. So with Uphold, we need to first, we can get the address that Uphold would have given you about the address or the transaction ID, that Uphold would have given you with regards to the withdrawal of your assets. You can double check on chain and you can make sure that you can send, that is your address, and you can send and receive and go from there. I think that's kind of the way I would think about it in particular. When you go through to add an account and then you go through the receive process, is that XRP address what you'd expect? Is it where the funds were withdrawn to? And that's kind of how we'd want to process from there. Angel, you mentioned, hello, the more affordable networks are available, the more users can reach, the more simple it would be. Good to change the coins without need for the stock market. Do you have any work on it? I think if you're talking about real world assets, I think there might be some work, but it's not something that we might do in particular. So definitely, but definitely a cool thing to think about. All right. Optimally healthy with Babs mentions what's the update on recovery phrase firmware. I wouldn't be, if you can be more specific, I'm assuming you're talking about Ledger Recover. If you had a question about that, I'd be here to help. We can always jump onto, for example, I don't know that we would have the Recover FAQ here, and you can always check that as well if you had any questions with regards to it. But you can always ask me too for optimally rather. Thank you, Nina, for the question. Always love seeing if we can get you guys' questions answered straight away. Angel, You've also mentioned how long is the battery status for the Ledger wallets. I don't have a specific number for you, but I've had mine for many years, 2 or 3 years now, and I think, and it's still working fine. You don't need the battery to continue to use it. For example, I right now I connect it a lot to my computer. And you also mentioned, how can we confirm if the battery is dead? This is important. If the battery dies, there will be no confirmation. There would be, you still should be able to use the device in particular, but I don't know that there is any specific confirmation or anything like that. There's no like switch or anything that happens in particular in Jaw. All right. Okay, John Smitty, does Ledger only gain access to my private keys if I do the update? Ledger never gains access to your private keys, actually. So just so you know, so even whether you do or do not do the update, we don't actually gain access to your private keys at all. Nina Andrade, is it safe to use the XRP Toolkit on Ledger Nano X to assist? XRP Toolkit is something that you definitely can use. It's something you might have to use. Let's say, for example, the article that I clicked in particular was just if you're going to, this is the open source roadmap. Not what I'm looking for, but if you're talking about the XRP Toolkit, it'll definitely be something that you can use if you need to, for example, delete your XRP account. Might be something you'd want to use. So definitely shouldn't be an issue, Nina, using the XRP Toolkit at all. All right, so if you guys have any more questions, I'd love to answer them in the chat here. Here for probably another 15-ish minutes. Shouldn't be too much longer. If you guys needed help with anything else. AP, you want to get your Theta token on MAINNET. You had ERC20 tokens in a Ledger managed address, so your tokens have no value. So I think there's a couple of things there, AP. So the first thing to get it on like Theta MAINNET would be, I don't know if there's a particular process, and this might be something you have to double check about getting that conversion happening. If that was something you had to have done previously, if it was something that was airdropped to you already on MAINNET, and you've already got the private keys to that address. It's just sitting on the corresponding derivation path or whatever, right? So might be something to consider there. It's not something I have off the top of my head, but yeah, you can double check that. Next thing would be if you already have the assets, then you might need to use Theta Wallet to manage the assets, at least for now. At least I think you wanted to get them off. If you want to get them on MAINNET, then you might need to use the wallet app, the app for sure, and you might need to use the web wallet in particular. Let's keep going. Nina, do you have a website for tech support offline? We would have a tech support online, so that is support.ledger.com, Nina. But if you mean offline, like in person, wouldn't be anything like that, unfortunately. John Smitty, why are the companies holding private keys trustworthy? This feels like it's opening floodgates for possible hacks or scandal. It seems to now leave a paper. Definitely not something that you would have to use at all. And again, check out with the FAQ, Ledger Recover FAQ, if you wanted to find out more about that for sure. There might be something that should be answered in the FAQ, especially with regards to that. And again, get a hold of us directly, and then if there's a very specific answer that you want, I can try to answer you as best I can. Normally via email is better. That way we can get it in wording for you guys as well. Louis Miguel mentions, how can I get Monero on my ledger? So you can use Monero for with your Monero app on the device, and then you might use like Monero GUI to be able to manage those assets in particular. So it might not be within Ledger Live, but it's definitely something you can do with your Ledger device, Louis. So have a check on our help center. It's would be really good to go through that. Detroit Dave, what is XRP Toolkit? XRP Toolkit, I'll just jump on here. Something that you can use to set up and manage XRP account. You can check the website here. You can go from the help center and you can double check that all of that there. Excuse me, all of that there as well. Detroit Dave. Hectros, when can you unstake your Lido? So I'm assuming you mean staked ETH and not Lido in particular, because those would be two separate things. If you have staked ETH in particular, Hectros, you can swap that. Let's say with 1 inch or Paraswap, swap that back into ETH, going from there. The way that Lido implements their staked ETH implementation is that you would send ETH to them for them to mint the staked ETH coin representation. That coin or token rebases based on the staking yields, and they would do all the infrastructure, and they would manage each block of 32 ETH that they might manage each validator, for example, right? So it's definitely something that lost my train of thought there. But yeah, with Lido, when they manage that, you don't unstake it yourself. You would just swap it out and then go from there. That should be all that you need to do. If it's Lido in particular, you should be able to double check on whatever interface you normally use to stake Lido. It's not something that, because I don't stake Lido, also LDO specifically or anything. Marcus Cox, new to Ledger. What's the process of removing Cardano from Coinbase? So I think I had it up before. How to withdraw crypto from Coinbase. You might be asked to provide an address. So here it's an Ethereum type address, but in our example, we might want to get a Cardano address. We would input it into Coinbase as the place where we want to send to, and then you would withdraw it from there. So the basic steps would be like that. To go through the receive process to get the address, you should be able to go through here and you go through receive right there. Should be pretty simple that way. Shouldn't be too much hassle. Might just need to add the address if it's the first time doing so. Marcus, if you have any questions or if you get stuck, get a hold of us as well. We can try to guide you through that process, but shouldn't be any issues there. Withdraw that, and unless Coinbase has any issues, hopefully not, and you should be able to withdraw that accordingly. Angel, love all the questions, mate. Angel, the address of my Ledger wallet will never change. Jimmy Conrad, can I use the same address even if I don't use it for maybe 5 years? You can potentially use the same address for a Ledger managed address. You just need to make sure you keep the recovery phrase then secure, because then it'll be the one that derives those particular private keys for that address. And if that recovery phrase is compromised, you have to change address because someone else could manage those funds, right? So that would be one of the considerations I would make with regards to keeping the same address. And if you have an ENS domain, which is something that was just added into Ledger Live, but if you want to use an ENS domain, just to make sure you pay for that, there are gas fee, not improvements, but savings that you can have for selecting a longer period of time as well. Wonder Generation, what is with Tron staking 1.0? Is there are you having trouble with it in particular? Are you getting stuck? Might be a good thing to check out. I think it was just mentioned in search, but you might potentially need to use TronScan just to perform some actions there for 1.0 in particular. But definitely, if you need to go, I might need you to go into more detail about that on the generation with what issues you might be having. All right, guys, it's just about the last 5 minutes. If you guys have any more questions, yeah, please pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we can end it off a little quicker today. We have streams, and we're trying to reach out to you guys, as often as we can. So next one, there should be something for tomorrow on Twitter. Thursday, I'll be in the office with Pringe, chatting about answering your questions as well, going from there. And then we'll try to have something on Reddit as well, and everything like that. You can see I was reading the news. So it's going to be very interesting next couple of days. Please, guys, don't give out your 24 words. Don't sign any transactions you don't trust or anything like that. Please stay safe in the markets out there. It's the one thing I always normally try to mention. A couple more questions coming in. Just some on page shows 100 allocation, but another will show the percentage. Do we get a new nano when we reach 100? I think you're talking about the space. If you have a Ledger Nano device and let me just get onto the shop page. If your Ledger device is getting full, you might be able to uninstall an application to then manage a particular asset. So it might be something there. You can get a new device, so then you don't have to keep uninstalling and reinstalling. But uninstalling your apps doesn't necessarily mean you lose access to your assets or the assets at all. It just means you need to install that app to continue to use assets on that chain. All right, and let's answer that last question. Can I convert Matic to BTC on my Ledger? Definitely should be possible within Ledger Live. If not, you can definitely use a bunch of the other options that we have as well. You should give it a try with the swap option here in Ledger Live. And if not, you can always try options in the Discover section as well, Gerard. So yeah. Please, guys, stay safe out there. Have a good rest of the week. Tune in, rest of the week if you guys had any more questions. And we'll try to answer them from there tomorrow on Twitter, Thursday on YouTube, Friday, and always on Reddit as well. YouTube as much as we can. Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of the week.